Do you work for the Catholic Church? Do you feel like there are no clear boundaries between work life and home life? Do you operate out of love for your job or fear of disappointing your boss? Been there, done that. This is the podcast for you.
Welcome to Serious Catholic Leadership, the place where you can come for clear answers and straightforward advice on all topics related to working for the Catholic Church. No fluff stuff. Today, we're dealing with boundaries and how to address home work-life boundaries in the work, especially in a parish setting. Just like with our normal life, our nature around us that we see, our work life should also have kind of a proper order to it. And that proper order should first and foremost understand and exemplify that God should be first in our life, our spouse, second, our kids, and then work. It's important for us to put our spouses first because that's our vocation. And our vocation is how we bring Christ present in our community. And so we should be putting the energy into our vocation just as much as we're putting into work. But the real question is, are we showing up at home as much as we are showing up at work? And a lot of times that disproportionate comes because we are so focused on work and providing that we forget that our first vocation, our real vocation, is to our spouse and to our family. So it is okay, and that's what we are here to say today, that it is okay to prioritize family over work. It is necessary for ourselves and for our community so that Christ can become present. But we want you to hear loud and clear from us today. It is okay to prioritize family over work. Don't you think so, Tom?
That's absolutely right, and it's difficult. That's not to say it's not easy. It's absolutely difficult. As people in the workplace, we have a duty to provide for our families, and so I think a lot of times we view working as a lot of times a higher priority than the family because it does provide that material, those material goods for our families. Mm-hmm. But in reality, I think sometimes we realize that, we don't really pour as much energy into our spouses, into our children, as we pour into our task at work, whatever that may be. And, I think in some sense, I just want to challenge all of us, myself included, to try to be very clear in pouring a little bit more energy to help shift that mindset and reprioritize our needs in this life. So one thing also, that I want to touch base on is that I think it was in Henry Ford. Right. He popularized this idea of a 40-hour work week. So I think prior to that, it was maybe 35 hours. And then in the 1940s, we find that it becomes U.S. law, that 40 hours is a full-time work week. Mm-hmm. And so with the Industrial Revolution, the advance of business and technology, we find there's this squeezing of the worker for just a little bit more work, for probably the same pay, and this shift starts to happen. And the danger is sometimes, I think, even in the Catholic workplace is we put more emphasis on what we do rather than who we are. And I think that's often a question that people are asked, when they're of working age. Hey, what do you do? And what they mean is, what's your job? But really who you are and your role, your vocation is so much more than what you do professionally. And that's why I think also we don't have as much of a priority on our elderly, on the unborn, because they don't do anything in the sense of provide societally.
Yeah. Well, and we're social creatures first. So when we start saying, we're part of a society because it's that society that brings us closer to Christ and that we're called to bring closer to Christ through our own work. So when you start saying that your social life hinders your career, that's just such a disorientation from that proper order. And even in parish life, we put so much emphasis on involvement. We forget that being a good Catholic is following the precepts of the faith. Are we going to Mass every Sunday and every holy day of obligation? Are we going to confession at least once a year? Or especially when we have serious sin in our life before we go to communion? That's what it is to be a good Catholic. And a lot of times that disorientation makes us think, well, no, it's how busy are we in the parish activities? And somehow that equates to being a better Catholic. And in reality, if we're going and participating with the wrong disposition, then our participation really is mute, and our interior life decreases as a result. So I think the biggest person who this becomes a temptation for is actually not us lay people either. I think it's our pastors, because our pastors can easily be tempted to kind of overdo it. They're on every committee. They don't want to delegate because they feel like they need to be seen in the parish as doing stuff. And American Catholics especially, we want our priests available when we want them, how we want them, where we want them. And since they're single men living on their own, they should be able to attend to us when and how we want. And that becomes a distraction, because spiritual fathers can only be effective if they have that balance as well. And doing all the time, constantly doing, doesn't give time and distracts from a healthy spiritual life. Sometimes no is the most Catholic answer a priest can give us. And we need to understand and respect the boundaries with his relationship with us. Because the more as parishioners we do that, and the more as lay people who work in parishes do that, the more priests understand and will I think begin having them a fight for us to value our time off. We need to put Father's time off and let him prioritize it so that he can be spiritually fit to lead the parish. And then when we come to him and we talk about work-life balance in our own life, he sees our attempts to honor him and give such importance to that time off, because it is important for every human. And it's a whole lot easier than to reciprocate, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think sometimes there's that temptation to feel like just because Father is ordained, that he's got his act together spiritually, and he doesn't need time for that. And so we often pull Father in 100 different ways, and he's married to the church, and it's important, just as a spouse spends intimate time with their loved ones, for a priest, for a religious, to spend that intimate time with our Lord in prayer and really foster that relationship, to make them a better person, make them a better leader, and we need to respect that. And Father needs to set that clear boundary as well, to say, hey, my relationship with the Lord is more important than whatever I'm trying to accomplish here in this parish. And I think if he does that, he'll find that those things kind of start to fall into place.
Absolutely.
But I think also that a lot of workplace issues result from these inefficient, ineffective systems, policies, management, and micromanagement is a huge culprit, and probably one of the biggest culprits in the workplace today. We need to be hiring competent people to do the task, let them do the task that they need to do, and not micromanage them. And it's a huge temptation. I mean, I've been in leadership roles, and I've had the temptation, hey, well, if I do this, it's going to get done quicker. It's going to be done better. How are your employees supposed to learn if you don't let them accomplish the task that you've hired them to accomplish? So I think it's critically important to guide your team, but also be critical privately, right? So like if there's an employee that you have that maybe they're not doing quite what you need them to do, sit them down. The weekly staff meeting isn't the time to correct them in front of everybody else. The time to praise them is in front of everybody else, but to correct them, do it privately, help guide them, help coach them, and don't point out others' faults publicly. I mean, that's probably a great way to break down a team and a parish, is to just rip people apart publicly or talk behind their backs. Probably another topic for another week is gossip. I mean, that's very toxic
Yeah.
in any workplace. It shouldn't be tolerated, but a lot of times it becomes the norm.
But yeah,
You know,
but if you're if
go
you're
ahead.
if you're conversing with people about their jobs instead of just dictating their jobs, that's a real powerful difference there. You as that leader of the parish, you have that opportunity to talk with them and have it kind of being an ongoing conversation rather than just a bunch of dictums that you send out.
Absolutely right. And I think a real danger is a lot of times in a real danger sometimes is in when you are hired and you read through the job description. You often read and it says, other duties as assigned. What does that even mean? Other duties as assigned. It's a catch-all. Father, the executive director, whoever it is like, hey, well,
Yep.
we said other duties, so here you go. So we need you to do X, Y, Z, even though that has nothing to do with your position here in the parish or in this nonprofit. And I think we need to be really careful with that as parishes, as institutions, to not abuse that, and to really try to have a dialogue. So if we're a manager, or we're a priest that's leading a parish, let's dialogue with our employees to say, hey, we're under the gun here. We really need, people to step up, pitch in, or hey, we've had some unfortunate layoffs. We need to manage and delegate some other tasks. Hopefully they're not, just being dumped on us, because I think sometimes that's a danger where positions are terminated and then, three employees need to figure out the tasks of two employees that were just terminated. So I think it's very important to just not abuse that other duties as assigned, and really have a dialogue and ask your employees. So if you're manager, a pastor, ask your employees, hey, can you help me? I really could use your help this week with XYZ, versus a demand of something that is completely unrelated to the job that they've been hired.
Yeah, that other duties as assigned can really be your best friend or your worst enemy. And it's all in knowing how and when to enact it. And when you've got a short-term problem that takes a temporary solution and you ask your team to pitch in and help, that's one thing. If you end up letting somebody go, if it's for budgetary reasons and you have to figure out how to redistribute those jobs because you don't plan on rehiring it for it, or if you don't plan on rehiring for it and maybe don't share that with your staff, it becomes a temptation to turn around and say, okay, well, there's 5 of you. This was one person's job, even though, Becky, Brenda was not with us anymore. We're going to ask everybody to kind of step up and take part of this. If it's temporary while you're looking for someone, that's great. But if you find, oh, well, this person's really good at it or they're efficient at it, why don't we just leave it the way it is and not turn around and offer any type of compensation, not have a conversation with them first to see if they're okay with it? Because if I started working for you and you had a very clear job description and that was not part of it, I may have taken the job because I don't like doing the type of work you're now asking me to do. That type of work may actually be drudgery for me. And so now you've got an employee coming in who's very good and competent at the work that they were hired to do, but they're stuck doing a job as assigned that they never signed up for because they hate doing it. And now suddenly they hate part of their day. Then suddenly they hate coming in. And so you created this downward spiral of drudgery where you should be creating a workspace that is conducive to people doing their best work. Now, we all have tasks that we have to do all the time that we don't like. And that's not to say I have to enjoy every task. But especially if it's not something I knew was going to be on my plate to start, it makes it so much difference. So
Right, right.
when we look at all of these issues that stem from micromanagement, from the kind of the other duties as assigned issue, from not understanding our proper order, from, it creates a work environment that can be really difficult because those boundaries are just not being respected. So then we can say, well, what are some kind of practical solutions? Every practical solutions that we can implement, or we can look at, or we can have a conversation with our management or our priests about that might help us out. And I think a good place to start is when you're off the clock, you're off the clock. Your employment and your work, when you walk away, should be done. And the only thing that should impede upon that time at home, that's the time away from work, should really be emergent circumstances that can't wait. If you send out a text or you send out an email or a call that's not emergent, don't expect me to answer it till I'm back in the office. That allows that proper order of us to be able to really focus on our vocation, which happens outside the workplace for most, to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think leaving on time is very important. Turning your phone off if and when you can, when you're not working, very important. Even if you need to automate the process of leaving on time, Zach and I were talking earlier, some people will have their lights in their office go off automatically 4:30 or 5, whatever they're done with the day. And that's, so if you get lost in your work, like sometimes it's so easy to do, hey, well, your lights just went off. It's the end of the day. Time to shut things down, wrap it up, get out the door, get home to your primary vocation. There's always going to be more work. You're going to, we're all going to die with unfinished work. That's just the nature of life. And at the end of the day, what's our real task here? I mean, is it to get to heaven? Is it to bring those we love to heaven? What's our vocation? Or is it, completing another email report? There's always going to be another thing to do on your to-do list. And actually it's probably a good thing to leave a couple things. It's nice to clear things off your list, but at the same time, it's nice to start the day and have a couple things to do from the previous day. So there's nothing wrong with, if and when you can leave duties and tasks for a following day, as long as you're not being lazy or inefficient and feeling like you're putting in, the work for the salary that you get paid. So, absolutely important to help reprioritize your priorities and put your vocation first.
Yeah. Well, and a big part of being able to do that is being able to sit down and do almost like a examination of your work life, like you would an examination of your conscience. And at the end of the day, say what's the most important things for me to do tomorrow? What are my 3 big goals I'm going to get done tomorrow that have to get done first, and prioritize your day accordingly, so that if you are pulling stuff over from the day before, it's small stuff because you got the big important stuff done. And as a whole, we don't really think about prioritizing our workday the way that we set any other engagement calendar. And we don't think about the night before. We come in and say, okay, what am I going to get done today? But if you take that last 5 minutes of the day before you leave to really do an examination of what did I do today, what was I most efficient at and effective, and how can I plan my day tomorrow to be the best possible, so that when you're walking into the office, you're walking in with purpose already and getting and going. And that way, if you're late or something interrupts your day, you just push it back. You don't have to readjust is so much easier. But I would say just like talking about Father and really protecting his time, that day off that he gets, we need to take our vacation. And as an office, we need to protect each other's vacation. When you're on vacation, be on vacation. Take your vacation days every year. You need time to unwind. You need time. They're given to you. And a lot of times people will carry them over, especially if you're going to plan a big trip. It might be nice to say, hey, we'll cut back a little bit this year because next year we're going to do 2 whole weeks somewhere. But take the time off that you need for your mental, spiritual, physical well-being, your emotional well-being. Take the time off, but other employees in the office can protect your time off so that you're not bothered during that time, so you really do come refreshed, because they know in return when you leave, you're going to protect their time off as well. And there becomes that kind of reciprocal respect that happens in the office that makes it a whole lot easier to come back, because you know you're not coming back to a plate full of stuff that hasn't been attended to, because your coworkers care enough about your time that while you're gone, they help attend to the things that they can.
Right. Absolutely. And you know, there's so many things on a practical level that can be implemented during you know, the workday to really set those clear boundaries, show appreciation for the employees, you know, provide for their well-being, you know, giving them a paid lunch. Obviously, working for the Catholic Church, there should be a great emphasis on the importance of spiritual growth of the employee, allowing them to attend mass paid, or you know, adoration weekly paid. Again, it's not to say that they're going to be hermits and live in church and you're going to pay them literally to sit in church all day.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you are serious about your mission and accomplishing that mission, and your employees are serious about it, they should want to grow spiritually, and you should want them to grow spiritually. They're going to be better, you know, husbands, wives. They're going to be better employees. You know, you don't grow spiritually and then, you know, turn around and, you know, throw it all away, you know, by doing dishonest things in the workplace. So you're going to be a better, more trusted employee. And other just things are just, don't schedule meetings, you know, an hour or 30 minutes before the close of the day. Yeah. You know, don't expect your coworkers again to answer emails, calls throughout the weekend unless it's an emergency. And if it's an emergency, you know, maybe set up a separate system to do that. Exactly. You know, so for instance, if cell phones are off or emails aren't being checked, well, maybe you have, you know, the home number of your employees, or, you know, another way to reach out to them that's literally, you know, only to be used in drastic circumstances. So you know that, hey, when your phone rings at home, it's father and he doesn't call that line, something's up, and it's important then to take that call. But you know, your business phone or your work email, you know, you owe it to your family to shut that down, and not look at it, you know. And you shouldn't be seen as a great employee. Excuse me, you shouldn't be seen as a great employee if you're checking emails and responding to emails all weekend long.
Right.
It should actually, you should, you know, be brought in on Monday and say, hey, you know, there's a time and place for that, and it's during work. You don't need to, you know, send emails all throughout the weekend. Again, and just rewarding effective, efficient work with bonuses, with not necessarily always compensation. While that's nice, just time. You know, giving employees, time is money. Giving them some extra time in the week or the month, or giving them an extra day in their vacation unexpectedly. If they're doing their job and doing it well, there's absolutely nothing wrong with rewarding that job well done with extra time off, or maybe a larger Christmas bonus if you're able to do that.
Yeah. Well, that extra time off and that bonus really does go to the heart of, you know, why a lot of people they're working to begin with. It's because they are working because they have to provide. They're providers for something, and being able to provide more abundantly because you're good at your job makes you want to be good at your job. And so it really does kind of position all that towards that proper order. You know, you give all of these kind of perks, we'll call them perks of employment, because we respect the fact that you, being a healthy individual who has a healthy vocation at home with your spouse, or as a single person working in the community as a whole, you bring that fullness of yourself to your work, and you're better at your work. A good spouse is a better parent. A good spouse is a better worker, is a better employee, is a good spouse has proper order, their spouse first, and it makes everything else they do more effective. They become more effective at the work they do. So
Right.
the big way of protecting all of that, though, is to have those real difficult conversations with your managers, with your bosses, with father, when you feel like your work environment is not conducive to supporting you in your vocation once you leave. If you are tired of getting the phone calls, if you're tired of doing the person's work who's been gone for a year now and they haven't replaced them, if your work has become drudgery, you need to respect the institution that you work for and your managers enough and yourself enough to have a difficult conversation. You might think you're putting a target on your back, but if you don't voice it and all you do is grumble in the background, that's not effective communication. And effective communication will always lead to best results, even if they're the results you don't want. Because a lot of times the results we don't want are actually what's best for us or for the institution. So have the difficult conversations, have an interior and a prayer life that's robust enough that when results come from those difficult conversations, that you're able to adapt and they're able to adapt and to change for everyone's betterment. And sometimes if you're having trouble with doing that, you got to bring in a third party. You got to bring it. Sometimes you need to be open to bringing somebody in who's impartial and competent with parish work life, and then have them make recommendations and advise changes that are good for the parish and also good for the staff and good for morale. Sometimes we're so entrenched in it, we really struggle with it. And one of the things
Absolutely.
one of the things I'm working with right now is an organization called Focus Parish. And that's what we do. We come into a parish and we help set up policies and practices. We train management so that they can be effective leaders and get the best results from their employees while honoring first and foremost their dignity and remembering the fact that their vocation happens most of the time outside of the work walls, not inside.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful, work that you're able to do, Zach. And I think, obviously it's a need in the church, because I think a lot of times, like you said, we can have those difficult conversations. Sometimes our pastors, our leaders are a bit more like Michael Scott, and and it's sometimes like talking to a wall, right? So
Yep.
I don't want I don't want people out there to feel like, hey, these are great suggestions, and you just don't know my boss. You don't know the guy I work for. He's he's tough. If I bring this up to him, he'll laugh me off. He'll brush me off. And that's why it's so important sometimes to say, okay, well, there are circumstances when you need to go above and beyond just having a difficult conversation.
Yeah.
You need to, maybe call priest personnel if you're in the diocese, or you need to reach out to a third party and an organization, a group like Zach's able to reach, provide and give some real professional guidance and insight from an outsider's perspective, and with a bit more credibility. Because I think sometimes, when you're in the thick of it, employees, you lose that sense of credibility because they hired you. So they're like, well, what do you know? I hired you.
Yep.
So, don't be afraid to also turn to outside assistance when needed. And it's just absolutely important to set up, good, clear boundaries, keep your priorities straight, especially for those that are married. Put your spouse first. It will not only be good for your marriage, it'll be good for your family, for your job. There's no harm, and only good really that's going to come from, strengthening your marriage, in a variety of multiple ways, especially I think professionally, which people often don't think about.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Tom, it was good to chat again today. I always look forward to these podcasts with you. So that's all
likewise.
that's all from us here at Serious Catholic Leadership, and we'll see you next episode.